the way I see it, it's a falling back into it. Like I love that story that Sid told the other night about the rabbis talking about people just fall into it, and that's the sense I get more and more as I keep listening, and my mind gets quieter. I find myself falling back into that true self because it's already there. It's so tricky because our instinct is to reach out for something and find it, but it's more of a remembering who we really are. The trying is from the personal self, right? It's trying and striving can only be a result of your personal thinking
in the past. Yeah.
Exactly. But when you let go and you trust that, yes, I can slow down and just sit for a minute and just, that's what I think meditation is, when you just give yourself some space to relax in a place that makes you feel have a quieter mind. So for some people it's going for a walk or whatever it is that you notice, that you have a quieter mind and you're more connected to that universal energy of mind because you're using your gift of thought for what it was meant to be. It's a connector to that universal self. And again, the more you start to see that, you automatically grow into that more. You remember more of your true self, and there's less and less effort. It's more just being yourself.
Yeah.
Like when Sid used to say, just be yourself, I would just take that as if what I'd heard people say, and I meant like, I thought he meant like, I would think like that means your personal self. But when you really hear that at a deep meaning, at a deeper level, just being yourself is letting go of your beliefs of who you are and your beliefs of what your habits are. Like often when we're talking to people, they say, well, I always do this and that's my weakness. I always do that. And after maybe several times of talking to someone and they're still saying that, and we do it ourselves, we have those concepts and self-beliefs, right? But to say to people, whenever you get that thought, I always do that, and that's my, my habit, I'm doing it again, just notice that you're doing that and notice, oh, well, that's interesting. I know who I really am is this beautiful true self. So why even entertain those beliefs about myself? Like, why second guess who you really are, this beautiful, loving essence? And so for me, I notice more and more that when those self-doubt thoughts or those that kind of self-beliefs come up, I notice them more quickly. And that's the beauty of it. You don't have to try and be the person you want to be. You just start noticing, at the quieter your mind gets, how you have this tendency to second guess yourself or put yourself down subtly, right? And then, so the deeper the understanding is, you catch it sooner and you stop doing it. And you stop thinking, I just, wish I were more motivated. I wish I were more productive. And we beat ourselves up for those things. But the more we get this quiet and we listen, it becomes obvious. Life is showing us without us having to go look for it. Life is always showing us. And when our mind's quiet, we see what life is showing us.
I remember when Sid said, the first time I heard him say that thought is the vehicle that takes you into this world of form. It's there for that purpose, but it's also the vehicle that takes you to your true self. Now, I had a hard time with that because my thoughts were so weird. and lost. I couldn't imagine how those thoughts could take me to my true self, right? And I heard Sid talk one night, and he said, we're looking for a state of no thought. And from our Zen Buddhist background, I thought, yeah, okay, we're looking for a state of no thought. Right? This is early on. A week or two later, I was at another talk, and I heard him say, you can't be alive without thought. I thought, well, wait a minute, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. Right? And I had a cup of tea with him not long after, and I asked him about that. I said, a couple of weeks ago, Sid, you said that we're looking for a state of no thought. Last night, I heard you say we can't be alive without thought. And he laughed, and said, oh, you caught me, huh? And I knew I was busted then, And he said, yeah. He said, when I talk about a state of no thought, I'm just talking about no thought from the past. He said, but something occurs when we step out of thought from the past. He said, when we step out of any thought from the past, we fall into a deeper dimension of thought. Now that really intrigued me, a deeper dimension of thought. Wow. And over time, I've looked at that over and over again. And what I see now is that deeper dimension of thought has very distinct characteristics, right? Not much, it's simple. That deeper dimension of thought is characterized by just being, just a quiet, nothing from the past. That deeper dimension of thought is always simple. It's always immensely simple, right? Elegantly simple. That deeper dimension of thought is always accompanied by a beautiful feeling. That's why we end up talking about the feeling all the time. Is that deeper dimension of thought that we've all experienced. I know we wouldn't be in this room right now, this Zoom room, if you haven't experienced to one degree or another a deeper dimension of thought. Right? And I guess you could say that the other attribute of that deeper dimension of thought is creativity. Right? And so a demonstration of what that means to me, the simplest one to me, is just the way that I grew up, the violence that was in my home, alcoholism, negativity. Freud was right. That affected me. It created my way of looking at the world. It created coping mechanisms in me. It created thoughts about myself, insecure thoughts, right? Now, it used to really bother me in the beginning when Sid would talk about forgiveness, because I would think, there's some things that are unforgivable and you haven't seen what I've seen. And I actually went to talk to Sid about that once after getting upset with him talking about principles and forgiveness. And, I let him know that I was having a hard time with it, right? And he asked me why. And it was one of the few times that he allowed me or was open to me talking about the details of my life, right? The details of what I was going through. And so I was with he and Barb, and I told him the worst couple of stories I could think of. And I could see that it touched him, I could see the compassion in his eyes. And then he looked at me and he said, Chip, your father must have really been suffering to have done those things. And I thought, wow, my father was suffering. I couldn't grasp what he was trying to say, right? And I was upset, but I was churned up, and as it turned out, that was good. Because a little while later, I was lying in bed, and I had a couple of experiences, one about Jan, I won't go into it now, but lying in bed and seeing myself in the past and how I wasn't that nice, to Jan. And I saw that I was living in a different world now, and I didn't need to worry about that. I didn't need to think about it. But a couple of weeks later, I was laying in bed and I started thinking about my dad, And I went right back to my last physical encounter with him, which was not great. It was a terrible experience, right? And I felt sick, and I felt angry, and I felt hatred. Right? And then out of nowhere, it just stopped. It just stopped, and there was a stillness, right? I was just laying there in bed. And the next thing I knew, out of that stillness, I just saw that my father was living in a world that was handed to him. And I just happened to be born in his house. It had nothing to do with me. I saw that he was innocently lost because of his experience. Right? And the next thing that happened was absolutely amazing. Is in the next moment, I felt this deep feeling of love from my dad, from my father, you know. Now, I didn't want to tell that whole story, but I just did, but for a reason. That quiet that came to me and that insight of seeing my father was just living in a world handed to him. And I just happened to be born in his house. It's not personal. Just this beautiful feeling came to me. Now, I'll tell you this. Before that moment, I can't tell you how many volumes and volumes and volumes of thought and ideas and concepts I had in my head about that relationship. Right? And in a split second, it was like it was boiled down to one sentence: profound simplicity. Just saw his innocence. I saw my own innocence, and my mind was quiet. That came not from anything I'd ever thought before. That came from a deeper dimension of thought, a dimension of thought that's available to all of us.